Hello and welcome to the Ross Cloud Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ross Sr. And this platform was created to motivate and to inspire in hopes that you will become a better you. I'd like to give a shout out to everybody that's listening all over the world. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Ross Cloud Podcast. And today is our healing session with Miss Beth Kincaid. How are you, Beth? What you got for us?
Doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well.
So today I thought I might talk a little bit about intuition. It's something that sounds real simple, but I had no idea how complicated it actually is.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
So I was going to talk about that and some things that are kind of related to our intuition that we use.
I love it.
So just the definition of it is it's a form of knowledge that appears in our consciousness without obvious thought. It's not a magical process, but it's actually an inherent physical or mental power that we have. And it's generated by hunches that come from the unconscious mind, rapidly sifting through past experiences and cumulative knowledge that we've kind of gotten over time. So it's often referred to as gut feelings, trust your gut, but it actually tends to arise holistically and quickly without awareness. We aren't even aware that we're doing it, of the underlying mental processing of that information. So scientists have repeatedly demonstrated that information can actually register on our brain without conscious awareness. And our brain is so complicated, we don't even know half of what it's doing in the moment. And it can positively or negatively influence decision-making and behavior. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So psychologists believe that intuition relies on the powers of pattern matching, as the mind kind of combs your experiences and goes over that are stored in your memory. It's looking for similar situations and presents in the moment judgments based on those situations that it's reading in your memory. So that automatic processing is what underlies the process of intuition. What's kind of interesting about that is an example of it would be the everyday phenomenon known as highway hypnosis. Or part of what I think about with that is as we drive from point A to point B, we get there, we don't really even remember driving from point A to point B. So what actually happens on the highway, your brain kind of gets hypnotized a little bit, and it tends to rely on your mental prediction of what you'll see coming up, which is called extraretinal feedback. And when that happens, your brain kind of switches to a less alert mode and pays less attention to those visual cues because it thinks it already knows what's going to happen. And then your brain processes what you see a lot more slowly than usual, and you start relying on your mental predictability instead of what you're seeing. So you're assuming that you know what's going to happen. But that can actually be very dangerous when you're driving for miles and miles and you get kind of hypnotized, and then you can fall asleep or, not notice some things that are coming, when you're not expecting them. So intuition, as I said, was referred to as a gut feeling as well. They seem to arise from the same fully formed thought processes from deep within us, and that's why it's called a gut feeling. But in fact, they're the product of your brain processing activity that automatically compares swiftly perceived elements of our current experience with our past experience. So as we're going through what we're going through, it's comparing it to what we've been through in the past, and then it kind of helps us to get that gut thought of, oh, this is what we should do in this situation. Similar thing to that would be your first impression that you get with other people or of other people. It's comparing that person and your overall reading of that person, and you're cues you're getting from them as to whether or not they're intending harm or they're intending to help you. And so you're trying to get a really quick read of what the purpose of that person's action is. But that can be accurate or inaccurate. So just because we've experienced things one way in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen that same way now. So part of what you need to decide is whether or not you can trust that feeling, whether it's correct or not. And so it does tend to be more accurate in some areas of experience than others. So one of the things that research has found is that intuition is often valuable in detecting deception. It's also valuable in detecting other forms of danger, and in detecting sexual orientation. I don't know why that necessarily is more accurate, but I think your impressions along the way of your life of gender and sexual orientation are present everywhere. And so I guess you just kind of have that general instinct about that. So gut feelings do have value in complex decision making. However, it depends. If somebody is studying data all day long in a big company and they get to the end of the day, it's not just the data that's going to reach out and tell them something. They're relying on their experience to tell them, to give them an intuition about which way to go with it. So a lot of situations actually utilize a combination of your intentional reflection and your deliberation, your thought process, is this accurate or not, and an automatic intuition. So deliberation, you're processing it. Intuition, it just comes to you, right? So there's 8 truths that I'm going to bring up about intuition itself. The first one has to do with it's highly efficient if you don't think about it too much. So you want to not overthink things. You want to respect that there's pattern recognition, that most human behavior happens automatically, guided by our genetics and our habit rather than conscious thought. So sometimes we're inheriting some of our proneness to do certain things. But if you tend to overthink things, it's kind of like your accuracy drops with the intuition. It's like if you go to drive a stick shift, if you overthink things, then you're going to feel like you're forgetting how to do it. It just gets way too complicated in your head. So one study that they did, these researchers did, students conducted about 8 different tasks, and they found that intuition was more helpful on creative tasks and things that tapped into that intuition rather than complicated things like trying to figure out rules or math, logical problems like that. Sometimes we get too deeply attached into intuitive beliefs, and we kind of take them automatically as truths, even though they're not, and we know they're not. So when we say, knock on wood, we know that that's probably not going to do anything, but we do it anyway, just because we're kind of attached to that, right? So part of what you're looking at is, should we trust? Try to learn what to trust and what not to trust. They did another study with men on a bridge and a beautiful woman on the bridge with them, and they put it in, it actually was more accurate on a regular bridge. When they did it with a suspension bridge, which made it a lot more scary, men were mistaking their arousal of danger for arousal towards the person. So you have to be kind of careful about what you're reading. Is it because of this or is it because of that, right? So that was kind of interesting. There's also that first instinct fallacy, that if it's the first thing that comes to your mind, is that really the best? So they actually did a study of college students, and 3 out of 4 college students felt like on their tests that their first instinct was the right one. But when they actually went back and looked at the erase marks on their test papers, they actually found out that most of those erase marks had gone from the wrong answer to the right answer, which surprised me to read that, because I've always been told trust that first instinct on the test. So part of it is it's emotional, because the more accurate intuition responses you have, the more confident you get in yourself and whether or not you should pay attention to that or not. So even if it's like the knock on wood piece, even though you know, though, sometimes that it's inaccurate, then it still is hard for you to let go of it. It can be improved with practice. So the more we practice paying attention to it and figuring out what works and what doesn't work, or in what situation it works and what situation it doesn't work, then whether you trust your feelings or not is going to be more evident. You also want to make sure you have clear feedback to it, that you're not just making up whether it's working or not. And so that's why we're told we need to pay attention to history, which we don't most of the time. But so an example of that also is good intuition might be good in one situation, but not in another situation. So a soccer player who has great intuitions about scoring a goal may not have good intuitions about spending money. It's just kind of 2 different areas of thought and experience. But even in every domain or area, that can vary at the same time. So the soccer player might be good at making goals, but he might not be good at defending. I guess, which is why you play different positions when you're playing soccer. So we try to learn from those things. And the more you practice it, the better that you're going to get at it. So another point is intuition is sensing and insight is seeing. So we feel like intuition gives us insight, but seeing, it's that evidence that something's working that is the insight that we gain, rather than just sensing something might work. This insight is actually having that proof that you can explain to somebody else. So scientists use creative intuition to select what path sometimes they're going to go down as they're studying. And sometimes that works out for them, and sometimes it does not. So it's kind of an experiment. Stress tends to favor intuition, and sadness does not. So that was an interesting comment to me. And part of it is because when you're feeling stressed, your body creates the release of the hormone cortisol, and that particular hormone actually reduces the correctness of our actual actions or intuitions. It triggers habits and shortcuts that might cut back or degrade our intuitive processing. Again, it goes back to driving the stick shift. The more you overthink that, the more stimulated you are, the less you're going to pay attention to that, what your intuition is trying to tell you. Sadness, on the other hand, tends to make people think analytically. And so in intuition, you're not supposed to be thinking. That's called deliberation. When you're sad, when something's wrong, then you want to be focusing on problem solving instead of just going with your gut. Some people, number 6, truth, some people are more intuitive than other people, and I'm pretty sure we all kind of know that. What's interesting is have they found, or which people actually are more intuitive or tend to be. One, they said there's 2 clusters of intuitive skill. One of them is related to insight, which we were talking about, which is linked to intelligence. The other one is related to implicit learning, or learning complex information without being aware of what you've learned, like picking up a new language. And that's not strongly limited to intelligence or linked to intelligence. So part of it is your thinking style, part of it is your intelligence level, but they have actually correlated intuition with better recognition of social norms, people that are more apt to be able to estimate accurately whether or not their peers' behavior is okay or not okay. Another correlated greater creativity with intuition. And so they've also found that some people who put their faith in intuition also pay a price, that they might perform worse on tasks requiring logic. They might have more setbacks resulting from poor decisions, ranging from missing a flight to getting divorced. They report greater magical thinking with those people, such as belief in astrology, ghosts, luck, God, and so on. Those people, again, are relying more heavily on that faith in your intuition rather than on reality and factual information. They're more likely to stereotype based on gender, but only in a positive mood. So I thought that was interesting. People might want to seek careers that match their thinking style. An accountant won't get very far if they're relying on their gut, but a counselor, as I am, might get further relying on that on that intuition. So you want to, if you know you put greater faith in your feelings, then you might want to make room for more time for reflection and looking into the facts of it. Number 7 is morality. Intuitions are easily swayed. So the conversations that we have talking about abortion or marriage or lots of different moral-based decisions tend to be easily swayed by all kinds of things. And one of the things they actually said was if in a study they sprayed fart spray in the room, believe it or not, and that those people tended to have a visceral reaction to what they were talking about, which seemed to be related to the smell in the room. Other people might have a more, if you're in a really good mood and they've given you something to be in a good mood, then you'd be more likely to approve of whatever it is you're talking about. Of course, its morality is based on more than a fleeting incidental cue. We also have deeper values like fairness and loyalty. And so what's interesting about that is there are 5 distinct moral foundations that guide our behavior, and those are listed as fairness, loyalty, authority, purity, and avoiding harm. So studies show that political liberals prioritize fairness and harm avoidance. Conservative political people favor loyalty, authority, and purity. So people have found that they can shape people's moral intuitions by catering messages to their preferred values. So as politicians are running for office, they will put in their statements and their talks and on TV things that they feel will engage different people's morals. For instance, when Donald Trump used, I can't say that he used this necessarily, but it was put into the news that Hillary Clinton, that she unfairly favored Wall Street. So that's addressing certain populations of people's emotions, which may tend to have them to intuitively lean towards one way. So we also used to have it in subliminal messages that were put in commercials a long time ago. Same thing. Now we have those memes that come on through the internet, and that is another way of having that subliminal effect on how we're intuitively acting. So metaphors, images, and stories can give shape to our own and others' intuitions, not only in politics, but also in science, relationships, and education. And so it kind of changes the way that we think, and we do things. Lastly, you can read people by reading what they write online. So there's cues in our written language that we use. In our dating profiles, some people show that swear words suggest high neuroticism and low conscientiousness and agreeableness. Angry words suggest the same in tweets. And in personal essays, exaggeration suggests extroversion and openness to experience. Past tense suggests depression in blog posts, and cognitive words like know, K-N-O-W, suggested in diaries. Surely deliberation plays a role in judgments, but I doubt anybody is sitting around counting, what past tense verbs are happening in here. So some people are better than other people at reading in between the lines, and they found the best judges of that were female, agreeable, conscientious, emotionally stable, compassionate, interested in others' lives, and big readers, especially of fiction. That those are the groups of people that tend to be better at intuition. Neither head or heart can survive on its own, so it tends to be a combination of those things, our head and our heart, that we use to make the decisions that we make. So there are dangers about the intuitions that we have. So because intuition really relies on simple associations that save cognitive resources, those associations are useful in stable environments, but they can also be dangerous in our complex, fast-changing world. So we have to be careful, again, of when we're paying attention to those and when we're not. So repeating successful behaviors, following familiar paths, or searching for simple patterns are all shortcuts that might breed disaster. And an example of that would be if you are going to this intersection and you've gone through it a billion times and nobody's ever hit you, so you're not really paying attention. It only takes one time for somebody to come rushing through and hit you. So you want to pay attention and be more aware as you do things and not necessarily rely on the intuition as a catch-all. So that familiarity, reinforcement, and imitation works well when you're using the same, you're experiencing the same decision over and over and over. But if it's different, it can be dangerous. It looks for simple patterns, and it makes you feel good when you spot a pattern. So it was interesting. They had a couple of examples that I thought were interesting in the research that I saw. One was that this group of students was at a hospital area, learning hospital, and they were in an elevator, and somebody was coming towards them at the last second, and this woman stuck her leg out to get the door to open so that person could come in. Well, the elevator crushed her leg, and it was going up with the elevator, and luckily what stopped it, somebody pressed the emergency button. So she was doing that because she was used to wherever she was that has the sensors in there that will make the door open, but this particular place did not. And so you could say that was a dumb thing for her to do, but how did she know? She was used to the elevator doing that. So sometimes that gut instinct works, but other times it doesn't. Another situation example they were using about the pattern is there is a riddle. If it takes 5 machines 5 minutes to make 5 bricks, how many minutes will it take 100 machines to make 100 bricks? So most people would say, what would you say? Yes, you.
You caught me off guard. I don't know.
What would you say?
What would you say?
If it takes 5 people,
okay, it takes 5 people,
5 machines, 5 minutes to create 5 bricks, how long would it take 100 machines to do that? How many minutes? So most people would say 100.
Okay.
But if you look at it as each of those in pieces, there's 20 groups of 5 machines and 100. Mm-hmm. And each of those groups of 5 machines is making 5 bricks in 5 minutes. So what's the answer now? So it takes 5 minutes for 100 machines to make 5 bricks, to make 100 bricks, because they're all making them at the same time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So another one in pattern-seeking intuition, another example was that there was a newscaster that was commenting on Mike Bloomberg, who was a candidate for the Democratic nomination for president, that he was spending way too much money on advertising. He was spent $500 million on ads, and the U.S. population is 327 million. So Bloomberg was saying, not Bloomberg, the news person was saying that Bloomberg could have given each American $1 million and still have money left over.
Ooh.
So they believed that, but that was not correct. If you divide 500 million by 327 million people, it actually comes to $1.53 a person.
Wow.
So our assumption sometimes with those patterns, it kind of leads us to the wrong area.
Wow, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, so that newscaster was later very embarrassed to find out that his assumption was not correct.
Right.
So another problem with intuition is the lure of stability, and it makes us ignore rare events. So it had never happened before, so why would it happen now? So that's kind of what I was talking about as far as the going to the intersection and driving through there because it's never happened before. And so I think they gave another example, too, about Germany and dependence on natural gas and that kind of thing. And so nothing's going to happen if you rush through a process with things. But that's not true. This one time you can have an explosion of some sort. So you really do need to be careful, in all situations.
Absolutely.
So lastly, they compare intuition to expertise. And so they're talking about, as an example, a highly trained professional that is good at an expert on detecting forgeries in classical art. In that situation, your brain's been exposed to a lot of relevant information and has itemized a series of subtle associations to the point that they're not even conscious of it anymore. So they just kind of automatically do it. And if you're not an expert, your intuition is untrained, you obviously would not make the same gut reaction to this painting as an expert might.
Yes.
So you don't want to just assume, I think this looks real, that maybe it's not. You have to trust your expertise and your experience as well.
Yes.
So intuition also affects our self-control. Because intuition is impulsive and self-control is not. So both happen more often when people are under time pressure or a cognitive load. So what they did is they did an experiment about giving somebody a choice between chocolate cake or a healthy fruit salad. And they decided half the students they were going to offer the cake and the fruit salad to. They would give them a two-digit number to memorize and hold on to while they're deciding, do I want this or that? And the other half, they gave a 7-digit number to think about and remember while they were trying to make decisions. So who do you think ended up being the higher percent of people choosing the chocolate cake?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure the chocolate cake.
Who do you think chose those more? The chocolate cake, the long number people or the short number people? You say short.
I say long.
You say long.
Yeah.
So the answer is the long ones, because when you have more to think about in your head, you're more apt to have more self-control less self-control than when you have less to think about, because then you have more room in your brain to think, should I have this chocolate cake or not?
Yeah.
So you want to look at intuition versus deliberation, and that's that ability to stop and think, is this a good idea or is it not a good idea? So your brain is automatically trying constantly to automatize our behaviors and free ourselves to do other things.
Yeah.
So we like the automation of things, but at the same time, we need to be able to decide when it's a good time to have that and when it's not. So if you have too many things going on, or you're on a phone call, you're not going to be as focused on that intuition
Absolutely.
as you are if you're not. So that's kind of why when we're talking on our cell phones or texting while we're driving, it's not a good plan, right?
No, not at all.
So the logic is that if cognitive resources are taxed, deliberation and cognition are more difficult, and we naturally fall into a System 1 mode. System 1 mode has to do with, being more intuitive and less controlled way of thinking. System 2 is that more intelligent, more thought-based system. So keeping the long number in memory taxes the brain by using those resources instead of the other way that doesn't. So time pressure is the other thing that can affect it. If you're in more of a hurry and you don't have time to stop and think about it, that can definitely affect your ability to make a good decision, including investments or consumption or ethical behavior, how cooperative you're going to be. That pressure, time pressure, can affect that in a negative or mainly in a negative way, but sometimes in a positive way. So we don't want to spend a whole lot of time processing, over what do I want to get on this menu. So the idea is it matters for us to pay attention to when it's okay to stop and think about it, and when it's important to do that, and when it's okay to make a hurried decision. If you're about to get in a wreck, you don't want to stop and contemplate the whole thing. You just want to make a decision. If a car is coming at you and is about to hit you, you want to get out of the way, right?
True.
So the last thing I wanted to bring up related to intuition is I was thinking, how is intuition related to anxiety? Because I feel like anxiety is a kind of subconscious response sometimes, as is intuition.
Yeah.
And so the differences apparently are intuition feels kind of like a gentle nudge, whereas anxiety feels like a fire drill,
Yes.
Anxiety often presents as a thought that frantically repeats itself, where intuition presents as a calming knowing.
Yeah.
So with anxiety, there's often fearful, obsessive thoughts that may feel difficult to let go of. Those thoughts can make us question ourselves over and over and over. Whereas intuition, again, presents ours as a calm knowing, as a thought that won't feel frantic or all-encompassing. So it's calmer, it feels more grounded.
Yeah.
Whereas anxiety questions things.
Yeah.
The words "what if," I've come to hate those words "what if," unless there's a positive behind it.
Okay. All right.
But every time you are asking yourself "what if," you are creating anxiety.
Wow.
Or possible issues that are going to happen.
Wow.
So you want to pay attention and be mindful of those times when you feel confident or when you feel unsure or self-conscious. So the self-conscious unsureness is the anxiety. It causes us to obsess about things, whereas the intuition feels good. It feels sound, and we can be more sure of ourselves. So anxiety engages our fight or flight response, whereas the intuition makes us confident to stay where we are and stand our ground.
Yeah.
And again, that depends on how successful you've been, right, with that experience. Anxiety activates our nervous system, and you're more likely to have physical symptoms with anxiety versus intuition, where you're calmer and clearer and you feel like you just know the answer.
Yeah.
Intuition is experienced in the present moment. It feels experienced. No, and anxiety is really based in the past, is what they're trying to say there.
Yeah.
So our past experiences become fear-based, and so that feels like we have to be fearful now, but we don't necessarily have
Yes.
to. Anxiety, you can feel it coming from you, where intuition may feel like may not necessarily feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
It could feel like it's something that you just know.
Yeah. Yeah.
For some people, intuition is a detached feeling, and it may feel like knowing that it comes from your soul or a deeper place is kind of what that feels like.
Yeah.
Like a wise part of you is operating on your behalf.
Yeah.
But with anxiety, those things may feel like that insecure part of you that has been traumatized before and is not sure whether you can handle what's getting ready to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is how your conditioning may have been growing up, your experience growing up. One of the largest barriers is to trusting and understanding intuition. So you might be a little hesitant to trust your instinct, your intuition, those sides. But as you start to understand it and you pay attention to it more, then you might be able to have a better idea or better read of whether or not it's a good idea to trust it.
Yeah.
So there are several ways to practice that. If you look up things online, there's a lot of different books and things like that that can help you to pay attention to what's a good idea to trust or not to trust. So to know whether you're feeling anxiety or intuition, ask yourself these questions. Where do I feel this in my body? Is this feeling coming from a calm, grounded place? How could my past experiences or emotions be influencing me now? And if they're closely connected to the situation, I need to have some time maybe before making a decision. Signs you're experiencing intuition would be a strong feeling of knowing, calm and sure about yourself, know exactly what you truly want or need to do, and you find it easy to explain yourself to other people, or you find you have no need to explain it. Signs you're experiencing anxiety, you feel self-conscious, your tightness in your chest or a racing heartbeat, shortness of breath, a feeling of restlessness, perseverating or obsessing on thoughts and worries, and difficulty when explaining your feelings, and when you try to you might sound frantic. So what if? You might be saying that a lot. Can intuition cause anxiety? It can. So highly intuitive people often experience anxiety, and sometimes their intuition may be the cause. So you just have to, again, go back to the situation. If you're having a dream about whether or not, somebody has crashed in an airplane or something like that, people tend to pay more attention, which is funny, to our dreams in predicting whether or not they want to get on a flight than actual warnings from the weather people or the airports, because that intuition, that gut feeling is so strong to them.
Yeah.
So it certainly can. Do people with anxiety have good intuition? It can be a barrier, but it also can be that those people are very intuitive, which is why they feel anxious, because they care more and they're more attuned to it.
Right, I got you.
Yeah. So how to trust your intuition when you have anxiety? You want to practice that when the stakes are low, when the risks are low.
Yeah.
So if you feel like, I shouldn't get on this flight because I had this bad dream.
Yeah.
How big is the risk?
Yeah.
Should I take a gamble on investing $5,000 in a stock? Maybe not.
Right.
Yeah. How much do you have to throw away?
Yeah.
Right.
Really? You're right. You're right. Yeah.
So
that's so true.
I found that topic to be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the bottom line about it is, with everything that we've talked about, it's important to really be mindful and aware and learn from our experiences and figure out what works.
Yes.
And what doesn't work.
I totally agree with you. Thank you so much, Beth. I think that was a definitely needed topic, and you tackled it with grace.
No, thank you.
Very good. You also took the time to explain to us about anxiety, like in a little bit more depth. Because I think sometimes we think we know, but we don't know if we're not looking it up and reading about it. So I think that's awesome. And I thank you so much for the value that you bring to all folks that are listening to help them become better. And we really do appreciate it. So listen, I hope you guys have heard something today that can help you become a better you. This is our session, our healing session with Ms. Beth Kincaid. This is the Ross Cloud Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ross Sr. Make it a great day and keep being great. Peace.